everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Leap Day. This is the VenueVision team. My name is Vivian Shen. I'm the head of marketing over at the VenueVision side. Just wanted to do a little housekeeping before we get started. In case any of you don't realize, all of your microphones have been muted. If you do have any questions for the team, please send it via the chat feature. We will be having a Q&A period. We will try and group all the questions towards the end of the session today. If for any reason we don't get to you, the team will do our best to follow up with you individually. With that said, let's go into the first slide. So what we want to cover today is introductions, which I'm doing right now, dealerships, credit card history, what is 3DS 2.0, a brief history. We're also going to go into the benefits of 3DS in your dealerships, just so you can understand where you can actually benefit within the dealership. Maybe it's certain areas of the dealership only. Also, what risks do dealerships actually face if they don't choose to be compliant with 3DS 2.0 regulation? And then we're going to touch on next steps and followed by Q&A. So as we just said, if you do have any questions during the time, please send them via the chat. We'll do our best to address them at the end of the session. So with that said, let's talk about our speaker. Our speaker today is going to be Gord West from the VenueVision side. Gord has over 20 years experience in payments, over 10 years in compliance management, and over 30 years as a technical support rep. He's currently the VenueVision customer success manager, or one of ours, on the team. So let me hand it over to Gord.
Thank you, Vivian. So welcome everybody to the 3DS 2.0 webinar. Dealerships and credit card security. Think about all the reasons you take payments in a dealership today. You've got sales or lease deposits, accounts receivable, service invoices or repairs. You've got parts purchases or even special order parts. How do those payments reach you? So we have people coming into the dealership that are making in-person payments. You're also receiving them via email or via phone. Credit card security is used at any point in the dealership where the credit card transaction could possibly take place. In the past, many years ago, who doesn't remember when credit cards only had a magnetic strip on the back of them? So back then, those mag stripes were done on a POS, or it could be done on a standalone payment terminal when you swipe the card. Fraudsters figured out ways of taking those mag stripes and replicating them in order to reproduce credit cards. Then we moved on around 2010 in Canada to EMV, what we call chip and pin. So in that environment, you were either dipping or inserting your card. So like an insert would be like into your ATM machine. A dip would be like a partial insert into a standalone payment terminal. Then the fraudsters came along and developed skimming devices, which were placed at the terminal level so that they would pick up your cards as you were inserting them. Now we move along to TAP, which is an NFC type environment, which is near field communications. So in that environment, you're actually it's like a proximity chip that's going near the device that's picking up what we call a contactless payment. There's no insertion or dip, no swiping of mag stripe. The card just needs to be in the vicinity of that card reader. And now fraudsters come along and figure out a way of how to read those cards from detecting those cards, even being able to skim them from your wallet if you don't have NFC protection. So each step of the way, fraudsters have become more tech savvy in developing new ways to steal your personal data. So now, how did we get here? E-commerce fraud has become an increasingly serious threat. the problem continues to grow even post-COVID as online purchasing behavior resulted in drastic increases in theft. Just to give you some stats, today's digital payment landscape demands a more robust protocol to protect businesses and consumers. With 65% of consumers using biometric payment authentication on mobile devices, merchants who fail to enable this risk losing consumer confidence and loyalty. Today, we have multi-factor or two-factor authentication, which shows effectiveness in combating fraud. Who doesn't use some sort of multi-factor authentication today? We do it on our mobile devices. When you're logging into online banking, typically it will send you a passcode to your actual device for you to do that multi-factor authentication. So not only are you authenticating with username and password, but you're also entering a secondary code. So that's what multi-factor or two-factor authentication is all about. A report from Microsoft showed a 99% rate of preventing automated account takeover attempts by using multi-factor authentication. It prevented this. So it's clear there's a need for this greater protection. And during COVID-19 pandemic alone, identity theft attempts against businesses increased 46% worldwide. So all of these concerns led to the rollout of 3D Secure 2.0 being available in late 2022. Using 3DS2 becomes an absolute necessity when operating in the card not present ecosystem. And this is where the card is not physically in front of you. So when you've got the card in front of you, it's more secure transaction because you can physically see the customer. You could ask for ID to validate them. When it's card not present, you don't have that ability. So you want to make sure you've got that added protection. So 3DS2 roughly collects 10 times more data during the authentication process. It includes a combination of information from the merchant site or application, plus input from the customer's device. So what is 3DS 2.0? 3-domain secure 2.0 as it involves the exchange of information between 3 domains: the acquirer, the card schemes such as American Express, MasterCard, Discover, and the issuer. That's the bank issuing the actual card itself. The primary objective in the latest version is to overcome the limitations of earlier versions of 3DS and make it a more seamless authentication process and enhance the user experience. The current versions are lightning fast, mobile optimized, and more reliable than its predecessor. It's an authentication security protocol that banks and financial institutions use to authenticate online transactions, which aims to reduce fraud, enhance your security, and protect businesses against fraud chargebacks for online card payments. It introduces an extra level of security for transactions by requiring the issuer to verify their identity. A 3DS2 transaction will go through an authentication flow, which is based on the issuer's requirements, which is either frictionless or challenging. So a frictionless flow, it's a streamlined authentication process where the or actions needed on their end. When you have a challenge flow, customers must provide additional information, such as a one-time password, in order for the transaction to take place. It's that additional factor of authentication to confirm the card user is the actual person. So why 3DS 2.0 for your dealership? It provides a higher security for credit card transactions. There's protection of the transaction, the customer's card, and personal data. If fraud is suspected by the card issuer, it will ask for the additional authentication data from the customer. This causes liability shift to occur because you've followed the 3DS2 protocols, and this ensures that any fraud-related chargebacks and recovery is on the onus of the card issuer and not the dealership when that feature is enabled. So if a transaction passes all required authentications, then the card issuer must cover the cost if a fraud does occur. What we recommend is adding a new 3DS2 merchant ID, or MID, as opposed to replacing your existing merchant IDs that you use for card-present transactions today. Any payments process, such as service invoices typically done with the customer and the credit card present, would continue to do so. 3DS2 are really for credit card transactions that are not completed in person. It could be tire sales, special order parts, deposits for vehicles, accounts receivable. What we're referring to is the card not present ecosystem. Those transactions which you typically receive a phone call or an email to order a part, or somebody is requesting to pay an account online. Dealership risks without 3DS 2.0. A non-3DS payment environment skips the extra verification step, and it goes straight to the withdrawal of money from the customer's bank or charges the customer's credit card. This endangers the customer and puts them at high risk of being exposed to hackers or internet thieves. Is the customer actually who they say they are? This becomes very risky when customers are not in front of you with the physical credit card. Statistics show that fraud accounts for 80% of all chargebacks to merchants. Dealerships would be at risk for fraud chargebacks because there's no liability shift to the card issuer when fraud occurs if 3DS2 is not enabled. Not only do you lose potential inventory, but you lose the revenue associated with that purchase. And then there's also the waste of time and resources in following up on any chargebacks that do occur. 3DS2 technology has been available since late 2022. Fraud continues to grow, but as merchants, you need to stay proactive and ahead of it. So next steps for 3DS 2.0. Check internally with your controller or financial officer on 3DS2 enablement. If they're not sure, you can always reach out to your payment processor to find out if your dealership has 3DS2 enabled in your merchant setup. If it's not enabled, you can initiate the conversation with your payment processor on creating a new merchant ID to handle those specific transactions where there is no customer-facing interaction. So this means you do not physically see the credit card or a card not present environment. If it is enabled already with your payment processor, you can follow up with us and our support team to ensure that you are enabled for 3DS2. Any new setups would require coordination between your payment processor and us when a new 3DS2 MID is created. That concludes our 3DS2 topic today, and now we can transition over to the Q&A segment with Vivian.
Okay, thanks, Gord. As to join us during the Q&A period, we actually have a representative from the Global Payments team just to address any technical questions on the processor side. We have Francis Poulin-Bouillon, the e-commerce developer support specialist that we're working with on the Global Payment side. So welcome, Francis. Just want to make sure, Francis, that you have your mic turned on. I'm gonna do my best to kind of organize the questions. We've kind of had questions that are covering the same topics, and we'll try and start high level and then go to the more specifics. If we do have questions that are specific to your dealership, feel free to message directly to your sales rep or to send it to sales@VenueVision.com, and we'll address them specifically. But we'll try and keep the questions today broad. So, Gord, you mentioned something about liability shift. There were some questions on what that is. Is it something that somebody has to turn on? Is it auto? What's liability shift?
So liability shift means that when the 3DS2 protocol is followed, and a transaction gets all the way through the approval process and charged out. If there happens to be a chargeback from a customer on that due to fraud, as long as all the 3DS2 protocol has been followed with the approval, then the card issuer who issued the physical card, they are on the hook for any costs associated with that transaction. So the dealership at that point, the shift of liability causes the card issuer to cover the cost and not the dealership.
Okay, so I have a question here, probably best for Francis to answer. Just want to make sure, Francis, that you have your mic on. So the question was about if I wanted to add a mid, will I have any downtime at the dealership if I add a mid to my profile?
Well, first off, you can hear me, right, Vivian? I just want to make sure my microphone's working.
I can hear you, Francis.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so would there be any downtime? The answer to that would be no, there would not be. We would create a new merchant ID, and we would essentially just replace it, the old one that you're currently using for e-commerce. When the new one is set up, we would give the new information to VenueVision, and it would just transfer the data to there. So there would be no downtime at all.
Great, thank you, Francis. Are there any specific types of transactions where implementing 3D Secure is particularly beneficial? I guess this could be Gord or Francis, either of you to answer.
In a 3DS2 environment, those are the ones where you want to utilize them for card not present. So that's going to be any payment you would take from a customer that you do not physically interact with them. It's basically via email, via a phone call, payment link maybe that you're sending out to them and they're making a payment. Those where the card's not physically present or in front of you are where you want to utilize the 3DS2 with the new merchant ID.
Okay, great. We have some questions about why wouldn't I upgrade all my mids in the dealership? Because we had talked about adding a mid, not upgrading a mid. So I guess there's some questions on why would I not upgrade them all? Are there advantages or disadvantages? Like, why wouldn't I upgrade them all is the question.
So you wouldn't upgrade all of them because probably the majority of situations, the customer is in front of you. So with the customer being in front of you, you don't want to have to go through an extra flow. So this is the frictionless flow that we talked about, where the customer doesn't have to go through those extra validation steps. So you wouldn't necessarily want to do that at your service counter and force a customer to go through extra steps when you're processing payments. Those are for situations where the customer is not present.
Okay, so I think this question is really a Gord and Francis question as well. We can respond, but Francis, you can do it from a global perspective. The question is around chargebacks. We had mentioned fraudsters and chargebacks. So it's the questions are, does 3DS Secure, if I enable it, prevent chargebacks?
So the answer to that is it prevents some types of chargebacks. It will prevent fraudulent chargebacks. So the chargebacks where the customer says, I didn't pay for this, because the point of 3DS is to verify their identity, to make sure it's them during the transaction. So if they come back and say, I didn't pay for this, the bank will take responsibility and have to pay the money back. It would never hit you as a dealership. You'd never see that chargeback. But if there's still a chargeback saying, I didn't get the services I paid for, or another type of chargeback, that might still hit you. So it only prevents certain types of chargebacks.
I concur with that. So it's basically any fraud-related chargeback you wouldn't see because the card issuer would be responsible for that. But any customer-related chargebacks for product or service, those chargebacks you would still see.
Okay, I know I've got at least a half a dozen questions here. I'm not sure if we're gonna get through them all by 12:30, but needless to say, if we do have some Q&A that we want to get everybody the answers to, we'll send them out in the follow-up email. So can you share any specific stats on how dealerships have saved on fraudulent transactions once implementing 3DS 2.0? We've noticed that fewer people abandon carts, definitely due to higher approval ratings, increased payment flexibility, and a better experience. We see that businesses saw a 70% decrease. These are just stats that we had during the research of this. So in-cart abandonment after implementing 3DS 2.0 was witnessed. I'm not sure on the global side, Francis, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, we really don't have any stats, but the people definitely see a lot less chargebacks. Like most of the chargebacks we see on our side would be fraud chargebacks. And since it's cut that down, you usually see like an 80-90% decrease in chargebacks for most places who implement it.
Okay, great. So this one's probably more of a fear and training thing. So people are saying, I'm interested in getting 3DS 2.0. So we've asked about the downtime, but now they're saying, will I have to be retrained? Is this something that I have to worry about getting my team retrained to make sure that they understand how to use 3DS 2.0?
So no, the only change is the customer flow. So there's no change to operation from a dealership perspective. Only the customer is the one that will see the additional verification step on their side. And once it's completed, and if the bank validates it, then that's where the approval will come into play.
Okay, I have one more question that I want to address so that we don't go over on the time, trying to be cognizant. I'm going to throw it to Francis, but keep in mind, not everyone is a Global Payments customer. So we'll see, Francis, you can address it how you'd like. There's questions about what are costs, if any, that are associated to adding a 3DS 2.0 mid to my solution set.
Okay, so the cost associated would be just the opening of a new merchant number. So on the GP side, I was given a ballpark estimate from like sales. So it would be around 200 for a one-time fee and then maybe $10 a month. Ballpark, it could vary greatly. And it would just, you'd have to contact your salesperson to discuss that and open that.
That being said, I want to thank everybody for sharing their Leap Day lunch with us. Thank you, Francis, from the Global Payments team, and thank you, Gord, from the VenueVision side for presenting on 3DS 2.0 Secure. For those of you who had questions that went unanswered, we will reach out to you individually via email. And as I said, we'll have a follow-up email with the recording information in it. That said, I give you back the rest of your day and have a great rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.